right, welcome everybody. My name is Bobby Beal, and I am a child clinical psychologist by training and worked for 25 years down in the Canton area, doing outpatient and lots of intensive programs like day treatment and residential camp programs, things like that. But for the last 10 years, I've been with Case Western Reserve University and at a center, training and consulting center called the Center for Innovative Practices. And we are the Center of Excellence for Child and Adolescent Behavioral Health in the state of Ohio. So this is part 4 of a little series, the final part on how do we stay resilient? How do we help our coworkers and supervisees and students stay resilient during, some pretty difficult times? And it used to be all about, I related it all to secondary traumatic stress and being when we work with these populations, we're exposed to a lot of secondary traumatic stress. And so it is not a luxury to take care of ourselves, it's a necessity. And so we did a little string of things. Today's is brand new because the world is evolving and changing. And so I've updated it and we'll see. I really appreciate your feedback on it and what you think about it. And hope we can have a little discussion. But let me run through my presentation here. And we're such a tiny group, folks. You feel free to unmute yourself and chat with me or to drop things in the chat. It'll be easy to keep up with each other. But let's go ahead and get started. And there we go. So this is a picture version of what's happening out in the world. And what it does is expand our view of ACEs, or originally adverse childhood experiences. But an artist put this together and said, really, we're under this cloud up on top that is adverse climate experiences, including the general climate change and the increase in wildfires and hurricanes, and COVID-19 is hanging out over there on the right side. And then the tree represents the classic, or what we all learned about around adverse childhood experiences. And you can see the branches are many of those things that are identified through the ACE study. However, they're also recognizing that we live someplace, this tree exists somewhere, and we're having adverse community experiences. Increase in poverty and violence, poor quality housing and affordability, discrimination, lack of things like opportunity, social capital, economic mobility, those sorts of things. And yes, there's a fourth layer. Down at the bottom is atrocious cultural experiences. And this really has to do with generational and historical and cultural oppression, abuse, and all the difficulties around that. And you can see those named. Not everything is named here. It's not meant to be comprehensive. It's meant to show us sort of the depth and breadth of all of these ACEs, including genocide, slavery, colonization, harmful social norms, segregation, and forced family separation that we're unfortunately witnessing more of. I'm sure it was always existing, but we're certainly seeing a lot more news about it right now. And so all of these things contribute to our collective trauma. And when we broaden our lens like this, we need to acknowledge that everybody's brains are impacted by all these levels of trauma. And we can't pretend that we're not part of the people who are impacted just because we have some answers and some solutions and some things that help combat some of the things. But we're still people in this world and community and are impacted by these things. Now, in the past, we've gone over some of the neuroscience, and many of you would be even more experts than I am about the neuroscience of what's going on. But for sure, we know that this ongoing stress that we're living in and around causes us to have excess cortisol. Unfortunately, cortisol creates more inflammation, and inflammation, many people think, is like the core issue underneath all sorts of medical and mental diagnoses. It weakens our immune system, and we end up with cardiovascular problems, libido and fertility issues, GI issues, and then let's add in depression, anxiety, those sorts of things. So there's just a lot going on. Oops, and I should have said this for the inflammation, because all of these things cause our bodies to react to what's going on and top it off with a complete stress overload. And it is very difficult to keep up with it all. I don't know about you, but the conversation I'm having most frequently with colleagues and friends is just, it's too much. It's hard to know what to focus on. Uh, and we're supposed to be really good at managing things, and we're feeling like, ugh, I'm not that great. Okay, so first of all, let's just hit some basics here. And I like to pull them from this lady, lovely lady sitting there, doing some work with that family right there. And that is, she has identified the 6 core areas that address the biology of toxic stress. And so she's a pediatrician, and her name is Nadine Burke Harris. And she did a lot of exploratory work and has written a book called The Deepest Well. And it's definitely worth reading or listening to if you're a listener like I am. But she identified these 6 areas. These are not a surprise to us, but sometimes we think we can ignore them and they might not harm us, but they should all be paid attention to. So the core things that she identified was that we need enough sleep. And boy, I am bad at that. I don't know about you, but I get behind, I'm feeling overwhelmed by things, and it's really quiet after 10 p.m. And I find myself working at 1 and 2 in the morning just to sort of keep up. And then, of course, I'm not rested well enough to do really well the next day, but it is a cycle. It's very hard to break right now. Everybody needs to move their body. A lot of people complain about the aches and pains, but the truth is we get aches and pains when we don't move. And the more we can get into the habit of moving our bodies, however you find a way to do that, whether you're walking a dog or playing pickleball or hiking in the woods, we do need to move, and probably on a daily basis, but certainly on a weekly basis. We know enough about nutrition now. We should eat healthier. But don't get overwhelmed by this list. I'm going to suggest to you that it's not about doing things perfectly. It's about being aware of them and doing small things that can move you in the right direction. So don't worry about having the perfect diet at all times. Think about, can I eat a few more vegetables? Can I, not drink coffee after 2 in the afternoon? Those sorts of things. Uh, Mindfulness is something that is important. It helps us reflect on what's going on and allows us to disconnect a little bit from the stress that's going on outside of ourselves. But unfortunately, mindfulness doesn't have all the solutions. Being a great meditator does not mean that you're not going to be exposed to all the rest of the stuff that's going on right now. We do have to protect and take care of our own mental health. Just because we're in the biz of some of these things does not mean that we automatically are great at it, unfortunately. We are, for instance, back to the mindfulness thing, I taught meditation for a very long time online without having a particularly strong personal practice. I got it. I understood it. I could teach it to other people. They loved listening to my 10 and 15-minute versions of it. And some people have it on recording so that they can use it again and again. But it took the pandemic to make me have my own personal practice, and it has made a difference, but it doesn't solve everything. And finally, healthy relationships. And we're going to focus on that one a little bit today. Because when we have healthy relationships and when we distance ourselves from unhealthy relationships, it can be a game changer. And so, first of all, I'm advising or recommending that everybody gets a hand on Dr. Burke Harris's book, The Deepest Well, if you haven't already. And next, we want to think about, so what can we do about all of this? We do need to do self-care and all the things that were just on that last slide. And it's not just about resting or retreating. The things that we do to take care of ourselves really strengthen us. They help focus us. They can calm us down. And I want to say one of the most important things is your connections, those relationships that you have with other people. I'm an extrovert and I love people, and I've always had a variety of friends in different places. But I didn't realize how critical it was to have those connections until, again, the pandemic taught me that lesson. When I was locked away from other people, I was like, whoa, I do not feel the same when I'm not connecting with people. So connect with your people, find who your people are. And there are a couple ways you can do that. We're going to talk about a social support network here in a few minutes. But one of the other things is you can be the helper. I'm a Mr. Rogers fan, and I think the more we reach out and help other people, and we are in helping professions, when we are helping others and are meeting other people's needs, even when it's difficult, um, we get the bonus of dopamine. And there's a double shot of dopamine in that because we feel that dopamine flowing through ourselves, our brains, because we're being helpful and we know it. And they get a shot of dopamine because they're being seen and cared for and helped. But don't get me wrong, this is really like me just saying, so do more helping. And you're already out there helping. I'm just saying we do get benefits from that. However, we need connections and people who are not our clients and patients. We need to have those other kinds of relationships. And so, above all else, I encourage you to be relational and think about who you're connecting with, when, why, and how, those sorts of things. And be real honest with yourself about it. Because even if you're an introvert, being connected with people, like-minded, especially people, is very enriching and helpful. So, another thing that we can do that's important for our sanity and our resilience during these times is living in alignment with your core values. Now, these are not your core values up here. Everybody has to decide what their own core values are, and that's not even the right way to put it. People invest time and energy in what are core values. I do home-based work, intensive home-based work with families in their homes who are really struggling, mostly around their children's mental health issues. And we do a little, what do I want to call it? It's a pie. We use a paper plate and we divide it into slices of pie and talk about where our family spends their time and energy. And then we talk about whether that aligns with our values. They might say, for instance, that they really value education, but they give it a small slice and they don't invest additional time or energy into not just their own education, but of course their children's education and what's going on there. And so it turns out that the things that we spend a lot of time in are not always the things that we wish that we spent a lot of time in because they don't necessarily align with our values. And so the only way to really know that is to identify your values and what that is. These values are lifted right out of a professional group that I'm a part of called the Association for Experiential Education, because I'm an experiential person. I do adventure therapy things with people. I get them involved physically with what's going on. And so it's my professional home is this group. And I align with very much with most of these values. And I just put them up there as a sample, not as anything for you to choose from. You really do have to think about what are your core values and how do you interact with the world based on those core values. And it can be hard sometimes to be honest with yourself and think about where am I spending the most time and why is that? Do I value this? Or do I need to shift some of my time? So I encourage you, even right now, identify the values that you relate to. Can you come up with one or two? Somebody else who has clearly identified lists of values is Brene Brown and all her social research out there about being vulnerable and about what we know, those sorts of things. And so you can find lists of values if you don't even know where to start, because some people don't. But I want you're all well educated, at least on some level privileged to be participating in things like this. And what are your values? And if you had to identify one or two, I encourage you to jot it down on a piece of paper right now, just to think about it. And then I want to ask you a couple of questions about it. I'm going to try to be quiet for like 30 seconds. And I'd really appreciate it if you do not have to share these publicly. You're not going to be asked to put them in the chat. But what are a couple of your values? Do you think it's been 30 seconds, Nicole? Close. The next thing I'd like you to think about is, where did you learn that value? How did you come up with that value? Who taught it to you? Who did you see honoring that value? How did you come to adapt that or adopt that value in your own life? And how does that value benefit you and or others? I hope you have a couple of chicken scratchy little notes there for yourself. But I think that when we think about who was important in our lives growing up or in education, for example, why were they important? I'm guessing they were sharing a value. You aligned with them on something that was valuable to you. Let me check this real quick. Uh, Thanks, Pedro, tossing some values into the chat. And again, I'm not asking you to reveal anything you don't want to reveal. I really would like you to be honest with yourself and dig deep. And what are things that you value? And think about why, how did you come across those values? Those people probably meant a great deal to you, who fed you value-based things. Speaking of that, let's try something else. Think about somebody who has inspired you. It could be personally and you know them. Somebody that you really like and respect in your own workplace and your own family, that sort of thing. But it can be somebody out there in the world. Some people are inspired by Mother Teresa. Some people are inspired by, I don't know, somebody who is doing something that inspires or impresses you. For instance, how about Nadine Burke Harris? She's an incredible woman who has devoted her life to working on these trauma issues in multiple ways. But who, so I'm going to ask again, and I hope you have something to scribble on. Who has inspired you? This isn't about anybody else but you. Think about that person. I hope you can all identify at least one person that inspired you one way or another. And think about them. See them in your mind's eye. What did they do or say that it inspired you? How did they share something important with you? If we were in person, I'd next have you partner up with somebody and talk about your person and listen to the other person talk about their person. Because there's a lot of inspiring things going on in the world. And it's easy to get mired in the things that are not inspiring, they're horrifying. And if we're working in an environment where we're helping other people who are frightened and overwhelmed with what's going on, it's hard not to focus on those things. But focusing on who inspired you and why can be helpful and meaningful. And if you think about that person and you're willing to keep playing along, write down a couple of words that describe them. Were they not just inspiring, but were they kind? Were they helpful? Were they uh, energetic? Were they funny? I do like humor. I don't know about you, but if I find a person who's a good person and funny, bonus. uh, so write down a few characteristics of a person or people that inspire you. What are the characteristics? Now that is kind of anonymous, neutral kind of ask, and I'm going to ask you if you're able to drop characteristics in the chat. What are things? Uh, what are characteristics of inspiring people for you? I've given you a very small sample, but what do you think? I like them. Honesty, truthfulness, humility, humor, curiosity, positivity, problem solvers, curiosity again, giving, kind, hilarious, peaceful, intelligent, advocates. These are great words. I want you all to look at the chat if you can, because the last thing I'm going to do here is say, which of those characteristics describe you? Because I'm sure some of them do. And I'm also sure that you are inspiring to someone else. And that's no small thing. It's a cool thing. And it's another way that we're connected with other people. So it's good to think about who inspires us, why they inspire us, and that we too you may inspire people you have no idea about. I do a lot of virtual training, and when I go to conferences, people come up to me and they feel like they know me because I talk directly to them for hours. And I'm never going to remember all their faces and names from these little Zoom squares. But for sure, they are connecting with me because something I said resonated with them, and they wanted to reach out and say, "Hey, I think we have this in common," or "This really was helpful for me." Um, all right, I think I've made my points that I wanted to make about inspiration. So now let's think about all of our connections. How and why do we connect with others? And how do we decide who we connect with? How do we measure our social connections. There were a lot of ways to evaluate and measure them. Um, and social support networks is much more than having a friend or two. So let's take a look at all the components of our social connections. I want you to, for this slide, and I'm going to keep working my way through it, for this slide, think about a decent friend or colleague. It does not have to be your spouse or your main person in the world, but somebody that you really like. A decent friend or colleague or relative. How does your relationship stack up across all these areas? Let's start with intensity, frequency, and duration. We use those words a lot when we're thinking about helping people, and can we reduce those things? It's one way for us to measure our impact, but it's also a way to measure friendships. How intense are your relationships? How frequently are you in contact with the person? How long is your contact? And there's no right or wrong answer here. I have a friend who lives out in the state of Washington, and we get in contact. We were friends in high school, and we get in contact sometimes every 2 or 3 months, sometimes every 2 or 3 years. And when we do, it's intense, but it's not frequent. And so I'm not saying that there are rules about this. I'm just saying these are ways to think about how you connect with people and how often and how meaningful it is to you. Another way to think about it or measure it is how available are they to you? How dependable are they if you need something? And how responsive are they if you reach out to them or they hear something about you? It's another way to think about it. And there's more. How big is your social world? For when we began to socialize online through things like Facebook, people were very interested in counting how many friends they had. And now with all the social influencers out there, it's all about how many thousands or even millions of people they can say follow them. I'm not one of those people. I do not, I'm very social, but I do not need to count people who like or don't like something I post. But some people do, and it's important to them. And it's more of an internet world than it was certainly when I was a kid. And but how big is your social group and how diverse is it? Some people are mostly social with people who sound like them, look like them, live in areas that they live, etc. I happen to be a diversity junkie, and if there's something different about you, I'm in. And I'm attracted to diversity on every level, and including I have a hard time making a PowerPoint without using all the colors. I mean, everything. I just like all the diversity. Other people are much more comfortable surrounded by like-minded, like life people, and that's fine too. Again, this isn't a judgment. This is just be honest with yourself about these things. And then there's the work versus social. Most of us have grown up and worked somewhere where we're in a team of people. We work with different teams on different projects. We align ourselves with who we are professionally, like a psychologist or a social worker or a doctor, those sorts of things. And do you socialize with your work people, or do you keep them in a work box? And do you only socialize with people outside of work? There was a long time in there especially during the 80s, 90s, early 2000s, that we were basically told it's not okay to socialize as much. You could have a work luncheon, but they were not supposed to be your friends because you have a different relationship with them. And God forbid you have a relationship with somebody that you supervise or supervised you. That really violated a lot of boundaries and rules for a while. But I think we're seeing that we don't get to dictate sometimes who people socialize with. But that's still a curious thing for me. I definitely socialize. I spent 25 years down in Stark County, and I have a lot of friends there, and they're all from work. And it's just how that is. One more, perceived quality of support. And that is critical. Do you feel like the quality of the support that this person offers you is there? Because if it's not, and by that, let's see if I can explain that. If the relationship is really about you helping them because you're a natural helper, are you getting anything back out of that relationship? Is there a two-way street there? Because if there isn't, that sounds more like a client or a child. You can't get away from that. You have to do things with your kids that they might not be ready to do with, back for you until they're grown-ups. So these are all just different ways. And I want to say more is not always better. While we want quality relationships, no single relationship can do all these things for you. And so even introverts or people who don't have dozens of friends need to think about what is the quality of the support we get from this relationship. So, I think that community is incredibly important. And this is moving us into the very end of the presentation. And I'm going to share with you some things that were shared with me. I was talking with a friend, and we were talking about the No Kings thing and pride marches and things like that. And the friend was concerned because her son had called her and said, "Mom, why do you go to these protests and pride things? And I don't have any problem with the fact that you're gay, but why do you go to these things? You're not making anything better by going to those things. You're not changing the world by going to those things. You're not making other people vote differently by going to these things." And we had to talk about it for a while. Were we having an impact? Were we not having an impact? Why do we go to these things? And what our conversation evolved into is we don't go for them. We aren't going to change their minds. And if I'm a research scientist while I'm thinking about it, I'm not going to change their mind. They are stuck on the highway of reactivity. They are reacting to the world, just not in ways I want them to react. But they're just as traumatized as everybody else in the world right now. Only they're fighters, and they're fighting against everybody else who doesn't look or sound exactly like them. So it's not for them. We go to our communities for ourselves to see and be seen for exactly who we are. It is where we find connection and belonging. And you don't have to go to a march or a protest to find it, but you do have to find your people. Where is your community, and where do you belong, and who do you welcome into your community? So that takes us to the end, and it's your turn. What are you going to do? Are you up to date on all of the things that I just talked about? You understand all the toxic stress, and you're managing it as best you can, or are there things that you can do? Are you connecting with your community in a way that is helpful to you? And are you connecting in a community where you feel real belonging? Because we're being told that we shouldn't have these little subdivisions of communities, that we shouldn't have, we're being told that we shouldn't let our clients identify themselves as in particular communities because it's dangerous. And it's the opposite of how we know to support people, is to hide and not have a place and a sense of belonging. So what's the next thing that you can do for yourself, for the people that we're working with and for your social community, for your family? There are things that you can and should do And I hope I've given you some ideas about them. Thanks for listening.